welcome back to my channel. My name is Lena Norms, if you haven't been here. Hello, I talk about books, and sometimes those thoughts on books lead me to talk about social change and climate stuff and gender and class, but sometimes I just like to give you a tour of my bookshelves. This is one of the most highly requested videos I've ever had, and if you haven't been following along, I've been doing a series giving you a tour of my bookshelves by colour. Yes, I organise my books by colour. No, it is not up for negotiation. If you'd like to catch up on the series so far, you can click up here. But today, if you haven't noticed by my get-up and effort, the effort made in the makeup department is frankly unprecedented. There's like 5 colours on my eyes, guys. Something that 2020 has really done for me is rediscover eye makeup, because masks have kind of rendered lipstick kind of disappointing. Not in that I don't still enjoy wearing it, but looking like I've chowed down on a jam sandwich every time I arrive somewhere and take my mask off can only be a fashion statement for so long. So anyway, today we're talking orange books. The way these videos work is that I give you a tour of every single orange book that I own, and then I pick out a few to talk to you about in detail. They're not really so much reviews as they are meditations. Casual chats, things in the books that might spark a conversation that I'd have with you if you came round my house for a cuppa. Or, to be honest, at this point in 2020, a strong gin. Actually, what am I talking about? It's illegal for you to come in my house right now, so you'd have to sit on the fucking front step. Actually, what am I talking about again? I don't have a front step. I live in a block of flats. Thoughts that I would call down to you from the window as you stood on the street below. Anyway, let's get to the bookshelf tour while I sit here giving off wildly aggressive 70s vibes, and we'll be back to talk about the books I pick up. Okay, so here we are at the shelves. We've done yellow, we've done pink, we've done red, we've done... what else have we done? We've done green, and today we're coming to the orange shelf. Very serious. We're only 2 books deep for this one. You'll see for some of the other ones I'm definitely 3 books deep in, absolutely. Neck deep in wood. Yeah, I'm surprised at how few orange books I have. I guess like orange again has like a bit of a big meaning to splash onto a book. But added to that is like all of the spines of Penguin books being orange, so I guess that's quite pleasing to put all those together. The first book though is a book mocking Penguin. This is a book called Beg, Borrow, Steal, Artists Against Originality by Robert Shaw. This is not a Penguin book. I'm sure his legal team asked him to put that on afterwards. It's quite funny. I'm actually going to go first in with the first book and be like, I'm going to talk about this one. Let's put that one aside to be talked about. This is A Proof of the Future We Choose, a book I talked about very recently in a video up here. Cherry Pie, which is one of Holly McNish's early poetry collections. It's really beautiful. It has illustrations by lots of different artists the whole way through, and it's a treat. A treat. Daily Rituals, which is a book about the literal daily rituals of famous artists and thinkers in history. Foxfire, Wolfskin and Other Stories of Shape-Shifting Women, what a title, by Sharon Blackie. A really big book on empire that I've never read by Niall Ferguson. I ended up reading the Horrible Histories edition of this, and then now I'm reading the Black and British book. Exquisite Candavers by Mina Kandasmi. Look at that cover, it's incredible. Utopia for Realists and How We Get There. What Dementia Teaches Us About Love by Nikki Gerard. Citizen, An American Lyric by Claudia Rankine. American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin by Terence Hayes. 1919 by Eve L. Ewig. Electric Arches by Eve L. Ewig. A really nice gift edition of Talking to My Daughter About the Economy by Yanis Varoufakis. An Unnecessary Woman by Rabi Alamidine. Against Memoir by Michelle T. Oh, and I bought this for the cover, but I really want to read the insides too, but I mean that goes for every single book on this fucking shelf, doesn't it? Together, The Rituals, Pleasures and Politics of Cooperation, and A Proof of Invisible Women Exposing the Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Caroline Credo Perez. For example, did you know that women are 47% more likely to be injured in car accidents because they've only designed seatbelts for the male-weighted body? Brilliant. Beauty, a very short introduction. This is one of the great leftovers from what used to be a university collection, probably from the uni library, of a very short introduction ones, and it was like medium useful, but I keep it for reference. The Craftsman by Richard Kennett, another pleasing cover. They've designed it so it's just a line of pencils that say the title of the book. It's a book about why work shouldn't be a means to an end. My huge and beautiful copy of Gone with the Wind that I have definitely never read. But look at this corrugated cover. Oh my God. Might be useful if you're trying to get into publishing. The Penguin Digital Dictionary is published by Penguin and DK, and it's got loads of like publishing terms in it. How to Be Alone by Sarah Maitland. Imagine that, the history of technology rewritten. This is a book about what would happen if certain technological things hadn't been discovered when they had, and what could have happened instead. Islam, a graphic guide. You'll see from my other videos that I have lots of these graphic guides around. Comic book style guides to big ideas. Anxiety for Beginners, a personal investigation by Ellen Morgan. As somebody who doesn't really suffer from anxiety, this is really, really useful to learn about loads of different people's experiences of it. But if you are going through anxiety, it's quite ironically anxiety inducing to read, because it's really vivid descriptions of how anxiety feels to different people. Just to flag. Did You Ever Have a Family by Bill Clegg? Oh my god, this is one of the best books. I'm going to talk about this one. The Overstory, which I've talked about before. Need I talk about it again? Oh, I'll talk about it for a little bit, why not? Spoil myself. Howard's End by E.M. Forster, which I think is like, I'm not a huge classics person, like I've read quite a lot of them, but I haven't, hand on heart, enjoyed that many of them. But Howard's End is probably one of my favourite classics of all time. Goodbye Things on Minimalist Living by Fumio Sasaki. This is actually like a pragmatic version of the Magic Art of Tidying. Like if you're somebody who can't deal with the kind of spiritual feeling aspects of the Magic Art of Tidying, then this would be a really great alternative. And The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry. So time, as you know, is an illusion, and I have a confession that I filmed that in a time before today, and in between that I went to stay at my parents' house while they were on holiday. Video up here if you want to see me in my natural Midlands habitat. Obviously, because of COVID, my boyfriend Craig had to drop me off in his car, and since we were going with a car, I decided it'd be a great idea to drop off some books and secretly hoard them in my parents' house. Ones that I hadn't read in a while but really did want to keep because they meant something to me, and I know that when I own speak it into existence, Lena, manifest it. When I own a place of my own, I know that I will want to have them all displayed in there. So anyway, the long and short of it is, 2 of the books that I picked up to talk about aren't actually physically here with me. I do have Beg, Borrow, Steal, and I also have The Overstory. I'm going to cover all 4 of them, but unfortunately for the first one I want to talk about Goodbye Things, which is easily, and there was a phase of my life where I read several books on minimalism, easily the simplest, easy, most effective and most persuasive of the bunch. So if you are thinking of reading a book on minimalism, I would pick this one genuinely. But because I don't have it with me, so I can't see like what I underlined and like I can't directly quote from the book, I just wanted to respond to it in some way and chat to you a little bit about my very mixed feelings about minimalism. Now, you might have seen on my channel before, I've done several videos on doing no-buy challenges, chucking out my clothes, declutters, and that kind of thing. And as I get older and my views on minimalism clash with my views on creativity and also my views on sustainability, I have more complicated feelings about minimalism. So while I really respect this book, and if you're going to read a book on minimalism, I think it should be this one, I just want to talk very quickly about some of my more complicated feelings about minimalism right now. One of them is that I am kind of envisioning maybe going back to my old ways a little bit and doing some fashion videos. I used to make fashion videos on this channel in my incredibly dirty student kitchen. Like, what is this? And there is a part of me that really enjoys the creative side of putting outfits together. And mainly because I do want to have a capsule wardrobe and I want to cut down on what I own. And I really have in the past couple of years cut down on the amount of clothes that I have. But there are some clothes, right, that I have got rid of that I really regret and actually have had to go onto Depop and buy again, or even sometimes have been tempted, but haven't given into it, but have been tempted to buy some fast fashion items that emulate those items because I got rid of them too fast. I was in a phase of my life where I thought I knew my style and I just didn't. And while it was the right minimalist option to get rid of some of those items, it definitely wasn't the most sustainable option. I also find that with a lot of the capsule wardrobe videos that I watch, they're people that really enjoy a beige. Oh my God, they love a gradient grey. And I don't know if you've noticed from my channel, but I love that on other people and I absolutely fucking hate it on me. Like I really do like wearing black sometimes. I hate a white. I like passionately hate white as an owner of clothes, not visually, but like the idea of owning white clothes like really stresses me out, and is it would create mental clutter in my head to own too many white clothes. And grey, I live in Britain, the sky is grey enough. I think there's probably like a strain of stuff to be discussed when it comes to creativity and minimalism and sustainability and like the joy of colour, and I feel like maybe I could make some videos on that. Would you enjoy that? I think I would enjoy making them. It would be a bit of an experiment because it'd be a bit different from what I've been doing recently, but if you would enjoy that kind of content, do let me know and I might make a few of them, pepper them, sprinkle them throughout my video schedule. I also have complicated feelings about some of the extreme minimalists on the internet and in those documentaries that you watch, because their minimalism depends on other people's maximalism. Like there was this documentary I watched about this woman who lived without money, but it meant that everybody else had to shuffle their lives around her. Everybody else had to own things to lend her. She hasn't built an ecosystem where everybody could live without money. She was just living without money. And I don't, again, the idea of minimalism and how it relates to capitalism is very important, because I think one of the reasons that people hoard or people don't get rid of stuff isn't because they're really greedy and just love filling their house with shit. Although there is a certain pleasure to that still, as a chronic, chaotic, grubby hoarder. It's because of this feeling of scarcity, this lack of abundance in society. My thing about getting rid of stuff is like, what if I need to rebuy it? What if I'm not in a financial situation in the future where I can rebuy it? I should hold on to everything I have right now in case it's useful, because I know society isn't set up to support me should things turn for the worse. And I think that true minimalism and true sustainability, where people don't buy more than they need or hoard more or feel comfortable with less items, that society needs to support a mindset where people feel like they will always at least have enough. Maybe not excess, but enough. I think there's lots of conversations about classism and money when it comes to sustainability and clothes, and how like some clothes aren't affordable and other ones are. But then that usually manifests in criticising people who charge enough money to pay everybody fairly, rather than criticising a government that won't raise the minimum wage to the living wage at least. Like, I think maybe the energy... Anyway, I'm getting into a tangent, but all of this to say, life is great and life is fine and I've got a jumper and no one likes you. You can't just tell people to get rid of their stuff. You have to create a shared ideology and a shared plan of how to have less stuff. Thing libraries sound really cool. I'd like to try one where you can go and borrow tools. When I was growing up in the Midlands, there were lots of like ways that could happen. My church had a video library, so we didn't really own that many videos, but I used to go and borrow videos from the video library. My mum used to take me to a toy library. We didn't have many toys, but there was a shared, I think it was run by the council. You could just go and like borrow a toy for a few weeks and then you'd bring it back, and it was like also an incentive to like not break the toy. And also obviously like I spent most of the time in libraries. Like I didn't own very many books as a kid, but I read very widely because we had a very healthy library nearby that my mum felt safe to just like leave me in. I also think it wouldn't work without a proper like arts system, because like one of the ways that a lot of illustrators and artists come up and make a name for themselves and can make some kind of a living is through shops like Etsy, where you make things that are kind of arguably non-essential. Earrings, little tote bags, little stickers, mugs, like things that maybe if everybody was minimalist and sustainable and only bought one mug, those ways of creating micro incomes that could turn into full-time incomes for artists goes. So basically what I'm saying is redistribute the wealth, universal basic income now. But anyway, this is the only minimalist book that I've really kept out of all the ones I've read, because it is the simplest, greatest pep talk that doesn't involve anything to do with like spirit or feeling. It's just like, why do you own all this shit? You don't really need it. I mean, that's a massive paraphrase, but it makes you also just like less anxious about having less stuff. And I don't know, it's a really good one to pick up, and it has an orange spine, so it made it into this video. Next we're going to talk about the Overstory by Richard Powers. It has an orange spine, so I made it in here, even though it is quite clearly a green book and about trees. I don't regret making the excuse to talk to you about this again, but on reflection, I have chewed your ear off about this several times. So I'll leave the videos where I've talked about this book below. I've decided I'm going to reread this book again before the end of the year, so I'll probably have more thoughts on it as I go on. But if you haven't heard this book before, it's massive. It follows 9 characters whose stories kind of start at completely different points and then kind of grow together like a tree. And the narrative is kind of really clever. It's kind of circular, but also really easy to follow. And all the characters are like, this book took him so long to write. He moved to the redwood forest because he was loving writing about trees so much and wanted to immerse himself in trees. And it's about 9 characters whose lives have no relation to trees at all. And then somehow they get pulled into this winding story about the ancient importance of trees. And it's really hard to explain, but I would really recommend it if you struggle with climate anxiety and making sense of what your life's about, or maybe if you are struggling with the idea of having a purpose in your life and feeling disconnected from the rest of the world. He puts the characters through these incredibly like painful situations. You really feel like this sense of loneliness with a lot of the characters, and then when they do find connections with people, the payoff is like in your gut. Like I haven't known a writer who can explain loneliness like Richard Powers can. Like, it's incredible. And it's also kind of about being radicalized in the eyes of the world by caring about the planet, while actually de-radicalizing yourself from a world that doesn't care about its surroundings or understand that the world is like a physical context, and if we fuck up the planet, we have nothing to exist on. And I know that's such a simple concept, but it's really hard to feel when you've been indoctrinated into a world that's all about the mind and like, here's an idea, let's do it. We can control nature if we think about it hard enough. 2 of my favourite like plot lines is a man who is completely paralysed but is incredibly clever and is a games designer. So there's lots of stuff around people wanting to escape their lives and have freedom in the virtual world, and then his thoughts about human connection and finding like a real solid base for his life despite being so attached to the virtual world. And also a woman who discovers this amazing stuff about trees that you might have like heard about. There's a book on it called The Hidden Life of Trees, all about how they're actually kind of one organism and the way they share resources and speak to each other. And she's one of the people that finds out stuff about that a long time before people realise that's true, and nobody believes her, and she gets sidelined by the scientific community and has to go into hiding basically, mainly through like naivety and misogyny. People just completely reject her ideas and her papers, and she kind of loses her job. And then I won't spoil it, but her story kind of goes off in this unexpected way, and she encounters some of the other characters as the book goes on, and it's just so cleverly done. And there's also a lot around direct action and vividly explaining how it feels to live in a tree for a while. Anyway, it's kind of like escapism, but also kind of coming back to yourself when you read it. And if there is anybody who hasn't yet been convinced to read it, I hope that as I keep mentioning it in every video, one day you'll read it. This is Beg, Borrow, Steal, Artists Against Originality. This book I'm actually still halfway through because as I read it, I take notes on it and then write them down in my big Google document of research. But it's a relatively short book, and it's colour, so it's got loads of like examples of what it's talking about and ways to think about stuff, and it's kind of like a collection of articles really. But it's discussing this idea that Picasso says that art is theft, and how true that is, and how we enact that when it comes to copyright law, especially when it's not usually artists that own their own copyright. For example, Penguin, who the front cover of this book emulates. I don't think there's a lot about it in the book, but it's interesting that they chose Penguin as an example because I don't work for them anymore, so I can say this. Penguin have a history of suing smaller companies and smaller authors in the name of like somebody else's artistic copyright. So because when you're an author, you sign with a publishing house, they own the rights to your words. So even if you don't object to somebody using your work in another way or remixing it, the publisher has the right to sue and does have a problem with it usually, which can be really loosely done and doesn't usually like cause much of a fuss because, you know, exposure can help. So a lot of the time publishers will be loose with it. So anyway, this is a book that discusses the complications with that. Mainly through the lens of like art history, but it does also bring in music, and he also puts like passages from Shakespeare next to passages from stuff around that time and shows you that a lot of Shakespeare was transposed or copied quite directly from other people's work, and how we romanticize these ages where like lots of amazing original art happened, but actually they were periods where it was more acceptable to borrow and remix. And it's complicated for me in the way that like the only way really that artists can get paid nowadays is through this idea of copyright and owning an idea, but I also feel in a very complicated way that there aren't really any original ideas, and innovation only happens through remixing, respectful remixing, but remixing. But again, it comes back to like the idea of something around universal basic income or something like that, where as people felt more secure and they felt like they would be looked after in their lives and in old age, they would be less precious about creative sharing and parody and collaboration. Because again, like one of the books that I haven't mentioned that wasn't on my shelf for some reason, I think I was probably in one of my bags, was Factfulness, which is actually a book written by 3 people collaboratively, and he makes a point of how important that is and how the book wouldn't have been that if it wasn't a collaborative thing. And he talks about the dangers of this idea of the one genius who makes the book and then disseminates it and blesses the people with his individual wit and knowledge. And then finally we come to Did You Ever Have a Family? I've mentioned that I've loved this book in the past, and I think I like unboxed it maybe like 5 years ago, but I discovered it when I was working with the Man Booker Prize, and they sent me like a massive box of books. I'll read you the premise. On the morning of her daughter's wedding, June Reed's house goes up in flames, destroying her entire family, her present, her past and her future. Fleeing from the carnage and stricken and alone, June finds herself in a motel room by the ocean, held captive by memories and the mistakes she has made, with her only child, Lolly, and her partner, Luke. This is an example of where, like, I don't actively go out looking for tragic books, and they're not like something that I think there's definitely a genre of like literary books that are just like, imagine if the worst thing in the world ever happened to you, now live that through without any discussions of the wider context of the world and what creates systems like that, and just imagine that your life is falling apart. Enjoy. Some people can handle reading lots of books like that a year, and I just like can't. Like, I think that you have to choose them carefully and choose them wisely and make sure that those stories are being honoured but not exploited. And I think this is a really good example of that, in that it's about a woman who... House fires is something that particularly like scares me. It's just like something that like every time I think like I'm very paranoid about things burning down. It's just like something that I don't know, it's just like whenever I have a bad dream, it's always about a house fire. So facing this book was like a big challenge for me, because it was just like, oh. But it's also incredibly unusual because it follows a cast of characters. Like, the blurb doesn't really explain that to you, but again, it's kind of like the Overstory. It follows a cast of characters around this unimaginable tragedy and how lots of people relate to it. And it also kind of, I think, makes a comment on secondhand grief and how when a tragedy happens in your community, how it's a different kind of grieving process if you didn't know the person specifically, but it does regardless shake your idea of what is safe and what is true when a tragedy happens like adjacent to you, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of stuff about that in the book, and I really loved a lot of the smaller characters. Again, they were really well filled out. I'm seeing a trend here because that is also what Trumpet does, and they are some of my favourite books where it's about lots of different characters but they're really well filled out. And this one was also interesting to me because I often don't see agents write books, and Bill Clegg is like a very prolific literary agent, and sometimes like when somebody's so good at being a literary agent, they kind of like are so in their own expertise that it's hard for them to write well. So the fact that he was a literary agent as well like really fascinated me, and was one of the reasons I picked up the book in the first place. Now speaking about it, I kind of want to get it back from my mum and dad's house and reread it, because it was one of those books that I kind of want to pick apart and like work out, like kind of open the hood, get my tweezers and be like, how does this work? How did you make this make sense? Those were my orange books. I hope you enjoyed them. If you'd like to watch the rest of the series, there's a link to the playlist here. These videos are free to watch, but if you want to be one of the lovely people that makes them possible, you can look into joining the Gumption Club. I bought this jumper off Depop, but it's actually kind of a little bit too small for me, so I'm seriously considering giving this away on the Gumption Club. We have like a subgroup called the Gumption Wardrobe on Facebook, where we like do a sustainable swap kind of system, where if somebody has clothes they don't want, they put it on there, and then you can just pay postage and send it to somebody else in the world for free. It's very nice. So I've done that with a few of my clothes, and I might do it with this, because to be honest, while I'm loving the Velma vibes, I'm not sure. Stop talking about your jumpers, Lena. Take a look at your bookshelves and tell me what your favourite orange book is below. I want to hear. Thank you so much for your captive listening, and until next time, Frog Snug out.